A father and his teenage son went out on a calm morning to fish on a familiar lake. It was supposed to be a quiet trip. Just the two of them, a cooler of drinks, a small grill for lunch, and a boat they'd taken out dozens of times before. But by evening, the boat was found drifting near the lake's edge, completely empty. The father and son were gone. Their rods were still cast in the water. The grill was still warm, burgers half-cooked, untouched. No sign of a struggle, no signs they had even left the boat. No splash, no scream, no clue. That was 2 years ago. Since then, questions have haunted the small community. What really happened that day? Where did they go? And most chilling of all, why does every theory feel more disturbing than the last? Now we go back to the beginning. It was just after sunrise when Mark Bellamy loaded the last cooler into his aluminum fishing boat. He slammed the truck bed shut with a grunt and turned to his son, Caleb, who stood off to the side sipping an energy drink like it was coffee. "You ready?" Mark asked, adjusting his cap against the sun. Caleb nodded. He wasn't a morning person, not at 15, but a day on the lake was better than school or chores. He stepped into the boat and started unhooking the ropes tied to the dock while his dad climbed in behind him. The sky was still pink and the lake glassy, unmoving, the kind of calm you only got in the early hours. "Perfect morning," Mark said, sliding onto the bench behind the outboard motor. "No wind, no clouds, and if we're lucky, no one else out here." The boat rumbled to life and they pushed off. Behind them, the small lakeside town of Burnett's Cove slowly shrank into a blur of trees and distant rooftops. Mark steered the boat across the water while Caleb sat at the bow, letting the wind hit his face. He didn't say much, but his father knew he was glad to be there. Mark had started taking Caleb on fishing trips since he was 9, but the past year had been different. Caleb had changed, grown quieter, less interested in conversation, more interested in his phone. So Mark had planned this trip as a kind of reset, a weekend just for them, no signal, no distractions, just open water and maybe a few good catches. They dropped anchor at a spot Mark called the Shelf, a sudden dip in the lake bed where trout were known to feed. Caleb cast his line first, smooth and practiced. Mark followed. For the next hour the world was still. Birds skimmed across the water. A pair of loons called out from deeper in the lake. Caleb reeled in a decent-sized bass around 8:30, grinning as he pulled it aboard. Mark clapped him on the back. "That's dinner right there." Caleb set it in the cooler. "Think we'll need more than one." Mark chuckled. "Yeah, but it's a good start." By late morning they'd caught 3 fish between them. The sun had risen high enough to make the water shimmer. Caleb leaned back on the bench, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Mind if I fire up the grill?" he asked. "Go for it," Mark said, eyes still on his line. The small gas grill was built into a custom corner of the boat. It wasn't fancy, but it worked. Caleb lit it up and tossed a couple of pre-made burgers on it. The sizzle filled the air. As the smell of cooking meat spread across the water, Mark's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out instinctively, no signal. He knew that already, but muscle memory still made him check. "I miss anything?" Caleb asked, flipping the burgers. "Not a thing," Mark said. At exactly 12:13 p.m., a neighboring boat passed by at a distance, an older man and woman fishing together. They waved. Mark waved back. Caleb didn't notice. "Smells good," Mark said. "Few more minutes." That was the last known sighting of either of them. Later that evening, around 6:45 p.m., a local teenager spotted the Bellamy boat drifting near the eastern shore, a few hundred yards from the tree line. He figured they were just letting it float and pulled his kayak closer out of curiosity. What he found was unsettling. The boat was empty. The rods were still cast, both chairs were in place. The grill was still on, though the burgers had burned into blackened husks. The fishing cooler was sealed. Nothing looked out of place, but there was no one on board, no signs of a struggle, no splashing, no blood, no overturned gear, no personal belongings missing, just an eerie stillness. The teenager radioed it in. By nightfall, the sheriff's department was on the scene. Deputies combed the lake with boats, flashlights, and drones. Divers went into the water. A helicopter swept the nearby forest. Nothing, not a trace. Sheriff Dana Tucker, a woman known for her calm and competence, gave a brief statement to the press that night. "We have located the boat belonging to Mark Bellamy and his son, Caleb." Both are currently missing. A full search and investigation is underway. Locals gathered at the docks, whispering among themselves. Some remembered hearing the boat motor that morning. Some had even seen the pair launch. But no one could explain how a father and son could simply vanish from a still boat on a calm lake, mid-meal, mid-cast. The next morning, Tucker brought in canine units and searched the shoreline. Nothing, no scent trail, no signs of anyone walking through the woods. Cadaver dogs were brought in, still nothing. Mark's wife, Lynn Bellamy, refused to believe they were dead. They wouldn't have gone into the water. Mark's careful. Caleb doesn't even like swimming. Reporters began swarming Burnett's Cove. The story made state headlines. Theories poured in: an accident, a runaway, a targeted abduction, but none of them matched the facts. Why would they leave the rods cast, one local said. Why would dinner still be cooking? By day 5, the lake had been searched completely. No bodies, no clothing, no phone signals. Just an empty boat that had quietly floated into silence, and 2 names that had joined the growing list of the vanished. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you are watching from today and what time you are currently watching this video. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more. By the 6th day, the search had shifted from rescue to recovery, but no one said it out loud. At the sheriff's office, the command center buzzed with quiet urgency. Folding tables held open maps of the lake and surrounding forest. Every inch had been marked with highlighter. Deputies came in and out, mud on their boots and exhaustion in their faces. Sheriff Tucker stood at the center of it all. She looked over the caseboard, photos of Mark and Caleb, the boat, the fishing rods, the grill. A hand-drawn map of the lake was covered with red dots marking search zones. She rubbed her temples. Something didn't sit right. It wasn't just the silence or the lack of clues. It was the way everything was left behind, tidy, undisturbed, like someone had paused time. That morning, she drove back to the marina where the boat had been towed and locked up. The sun beat down on the roof of the boathouse as she unlocked the door. Inside, the Bellamy boat sat on a trailer, drained and cleaned, but untouched since the day it was found. She climbed aboard, careful not to touch too much. The rods were still stored in the holders. The cooler sat closed beside the seat. She opened it, 3 fish on ice, still fresh. The grill had been scrubbed, but Tucker imagined the scene, the sizzle, the smoke, the smell of burning meat as no one returned to flip the burgers. She looked around, trying to picture what had gone wrong. No overturned chairs, no claw marks. No panic. She climbed out and called over Deputy Greg Miller, who was reviewing the drone footage again. "Any angle we missed?" she asked. Greg shook his head. "Every square foot's been checked. North to south, lake to shore. They're not out there." "You sure about that?" Greg hesitated. "We can keep going, but it's been a week." Sheriff Tucker stared out at the water. "We keep going." Back at the Bellamy house, Lynn sat at the kitchen table, twisting a dish towel in her hands. The place was too quiet. Mark's coffee mug was still on the counter from the day he left. Caleb's sneakers sat by the back door, one tipped over like he'd rushed out. She couldn't bring herself to move them. Their dog, Rusty, whined from the corner of the room. He hadn't eaten much since they left. Lynn had replayed every conversation from that morning over and over in her head. Mark had kissed her goodbye. Caleb had grumbled about forgetting his headphones. She'd packed snacks, told them to be back before dark, they had promised. Her sister Kate sat across from her, gently rubbing her arm. "They're still out there," Lynn said quietly. "They have to be." Kate didn't know what to say. What could you say when 2 people disappeared in broad daylight from a small, calm lake? On the lake's eastern edge, Game Warden Neil Bradshaw took a small motorboat out alone. He wasn't part of the official investigation, but he knew this lake better than anyone. Every rock, every drop-off, every hidden inlet. He steered toward the tree line where the Bellamy boat had been found. He shut off the motor and let the boat drift. The water was still. The only sound was the lapping against the hull. Neil stood up and scanned the shoreline with binoculars. Thick pines, dense brush, a couple of trails used by hikers. He spotted nothing unusual. No footprints, no broken branches. Still something tugged at him. He killed the engine and dropped anchor. He cast his line into the water, more out of habit than anything else. Then he saw something glinting near the reeds, a small silver object. He paddled closer. It was a keychain, a simple one, blue and shaped like a football. Faded letters on the side read number 88 Caleb. Neil picked it up and sat back down slowly. It hadn't been there the last time this area was checked. He was sure of it. Back at the station, the keychain was logged and bagged. Sheriff Tucker examined it. "You're sure this wasn't planted?" Neil shook his head. It was wedged in mud. Took some effort to pull it out. Someone didn't just toss it there. Could have been dropped earlier in the day. Possible, but I don't think so. Tucker nodded. "We need to get dogs back in the east side." She stared at the map again. There was a trailhead about a mile from where the keychain was found. A narrow path that led deep into the forest, used mostly by hunters. She made the call. The next morning, 4 deputies and 2 canine units headed out to the trail. The sun beat down through the pines, and the air smelled like pine sap and damp leaves. The dogs picked up a scent quickly. One barked, pawing at the ground, then pulled ahead into the woods. The team followed. They trekked for almost a mile, deeper than most people ever went. Then the dogs stopped, sniffing the ground and circling. "What is it?" a deputy asked. The handler knelt down. Something was here. Could be they passed through. No items, no blood, no clothing. But the dogs lingered, barking at a patch of thick undergrowth. They marked the spot and kept going. Half an hour later, they reached a small clearing, a forgotten part of the woods. In the middle stood an old wooden platform, rotted and overgrown with weeds. "Wasn't on any of the maps," one deputy said. They stepped onto it. The wood creaked under their boots. A few feet away, under a pile of leaves, someone spotted a crumpled fishing hat. They bagged it and hiked back. Sheriff Tucker examined it at the station. It was sun-bleached, but inside the brim were the initials MB. Mark Bellamy's hat. Now they had 2 items. A keychain and a hat, both found far from the boat. No blood, no signs of foul play. But it meant one thing for sure: they'd left the boat. The question was why, or who made them. Meanwhile, Lynn sat alone in Caleb's room. His laptop was still on his desk. She turned it on, typing in the password she knew he'd never change. Rangers88. She opened his browser history. Nothing unusual. YouTube videos about fishing, basketball, a few Reddit threads about camping gear. Then something caught her eye, a bookmarked page titled, "How to Disappear in the Woods Without Being Found." Her hands trembled as she clicked it open. It was a guide, long, detailed, strange. It talked about survival techniques, avoiding search parties, how to mask your scent. Why would Caleb have saved this? And if he had read it, was he trying to vanish? Was he planning this all along? Lynn stared at the screen, her heart racing. Something was wrong. She just didn't know what. 3 weeks after Mark and Caleb vanished, the national media moved on. The posters started curling at the corners. Fewer people showed up at the volunteer searches. But Sheriff Dana Tucker was still working like it happened yesterday. Her office looked like a war room. The whiteboard had grown crowded with red markers and timelines. Photographs of the boat, the fishing gear, the burned food on the grill. Everything was there. The keychain, the hat, the bookmarked article on Caleb's laptop, but no solid lead. That changed when she got a call from State Detective Roy Henley. "I've been digging through old missing persons reports from around the lake," he said. Tucker raised an eyebrow. "What for?" "Trying to find patterns. Turns out, this isn't the first time someone went missing near that area. Not the lake exactly, but close." Tucker leaned forward. "How close?" 3 cases in 10 years. All people camping or hiking near the eastern side of the lake. All disappeared without a trace. No signs of struggle. Gear left behind, not a single body ever found. Why wasn't this flagged earlier? Henley sighed. Scattered counties, no connection ever made. But after reading your reports, I think it's worth a closer look. Tucker stood in silence for a moment, then nodded. Send me everything. She spent the next hour going through the files. The cases weren't identical, but there were enough odd details to raise questions. A solo hiker who vanished mid-hike, backpack still on the trail. A couple who left behind a still-lit campfire. Another man found dead asleep in his tent, his brother missing, tent unzipped. Always the same side of the lake. Always the same eerie quiet, but Tucker refused to call it strange. She was a sheriff, not a storyteller. There had to be a human explanation. She just hadn't found it yet. Meanwhile, Lynn Bellamy wasn't sleeping. The bookmarked article on Caleb's laptop kept her awake. She had printed it out, read it 3 times, and still couldn't believe it. The title made it sound like fiction, but the details were real. It explained how to hide tracks, how to travel at night, how to avoid being found. Caleb wasn't the outdoorsy type. He liked fishing, sure, but he wasn't the kid to read wilderness manuals for fun. She started wondering, did someone else use his laptop? Was someone planning something and hiding it under Caleb's name? Then she remembered something. The week before the trip, Caleb had spent a lot of time texting, smiling at his phone. At the time, she thought maybe it was a girl. Now, she wasn't so sure. She unlocked his phone, which the police had returned. She scrolled through his messages. One thread stood out, no name, just a number. The texts were wiped clean, but the date stamp showed that Caleb had messaged that number several times in the 3 days before the trip. The last message was at 5:44 a.m. the morning they left. She called the number. It rang twice, then disconnected. Her hands went cold. She called Sheriff Tucker immediately. I found something on Caleb's phone. A number? No name. The texts are gone, but it was active the day they disappeared. Tucker jotted the number down. I'll have it traced. An hour later, a report came in. The number was a burner, prepaid, unregistered, bought from a gas station 40 miles away. But that wasn't the part that shook her. The phone had pinged a tower less than 2 miles from the trailhead the same morning the Bellamys vanished. Someone else had been out there. The next morning, Sheriff Tucker returned to the trail with a small team. They had narrowed the location from the cell tower data. Whoever had that burner phone was near the woods before the Bellamys vanished. She moved quickly, boots crunching on dry leaves. The team split into 2 groups, combing opposite sides of the trail. Then Deputy Maria Solis shouted, "Over here!" Tucker ran to her side. Maria knelt beside a small fire ring, charred wood, crushed beer cans, and something else. A torn hoodie. She picked it up with gloved hands. It was small, possibly a teenager's size. The tag was ripped out. "Looks like someone camped here not long ago," Maria said. Tucker examined the ground. Tracks were faint, but there. 1 set, not 2, someone had been alone. She pulled out her phone. "We need drone coverage. Now." That afternoon, a drone operator scanned the area from above. One camera spotted a narrow footpath hidden by brush, but definitely man-made. It wound east, away from the trail, toward a ridge. Tucker made the decision. They would hike the path at first light. The next day, the team returned. They followed the hidden trail for over a mile. The forest grew denser. The path narrowed, but the signs were clear, broken branches, a rope tied to a tree, makeshift markers carved into trunks. Then they found it. A small campsite hidden in a natural dip in the ground. A faded tarp stretched over a rope. Rusted food cans. A metal box filled with fishing lures. And a spiral notebook. The pages were damp but legible. The name on the first page, Caleb Bellamy. Tucker flipped through it. The handwriting was unmistakable, shaky at first, then sharper. Page after page of entries, thoughts, and scattered notes. But something was off. The first entry was dated the day before the fishing trip. "If this works, no one will know. Not right away. I'll leave enough to confuse them." She kept reading. "He doesn't know yet. I need to figure out how to tell him." Another line, "Once we're far enough in, we'll be safe." And one more, "The lake is the perfect place. No one would think twice." Tucker closed the notebook and looked around. There were no signs of anyone living there recently. The place had been abandoned at least a week. But this changed everything. Caleb had been planning something big. That night, back at the station, Tucker spread the notebook across her desk. Deputy Miller read over her shoulder. He was going to disappear. With his dad? Miller asked. Tucker didn't answer. She looked again at the map, at the trail, the burner phone, the campsite. What had Caleb been running from? And more importantly, had someone caught up with them? Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you are watching from today and what time you are currently watching this video. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more. Sheriff Tucker sat in her office late that night, reading Caleb's notebook for the 3rd time. Every word felt like a breadcrumb, but they weren't leading her toward answers, just deeper into confusion. The entries weren't just random thoughts. They were careful, calculated. Caleb had been planning to disappear, but why? And had Mark known? The notebook suggested otherwise. He doesn't know yet. I need to find the right time. Had Caleb planned to convince his father on the trip? Or force him into something? Tucker closed the notebook and leaned back. She needed more. The next morning she met with Lynn at the Bellamy house. Lynn looked thinner, drained. "We found a notebook," Tucker said gently. "At a campsite in the woods, Caleb's." Lynn's eyes widened. "What does it say?" "He was planning something. He wrote about disappearing, said the lake was the perfect place." Lynn shook her head slowly. "No, he wouldn't leave like that. Not Caleb. He also mentioned Mark, said he hadn't told him yet. We think Caleb was trying to get away. But the question is, from what?" Lynn swallowed hard. "He never said anything to me. He wasn't in trouble. His grades were good. He didn't fight with anyone at school." "What about online?" Tucker asked. "Did he ever talk to people you didn't know?" Lynn thought. "He played games online sometimes. Mostly basketball games, a little camping survival stuff. But I never saw anything strange." Tucker nodded. "We'll look through his online accounts again, more deeply this time." Before she left, she paused at the front door. "Lynn, is there any chance Mark would have gone along with it? Helped Caleb disappear?" Lynn blinked. "No, Mark was the kind of man who believed in responsibility. He wouldn't just walk away from his job, his family, his life. Then maybe he didn't." At the sheriff's office, a technician named Carla combed through Caleb's online footprint. She called Tucker over that afternoon. "You were right to dig deeper," Carla said. "There's more." She pulled up a private browser history. Caleb visited a private forum. It's called Trail Echo. It's mostly anonymous users, survivalist types, off-the-grid living, and people talking about walking away from society. She clicked a thread titled The Vanish Point. User WanderEcho88, it was Caleb. The post stretched back 4 months. He asked questions: how to disappear without getting caught, how to live in the woods, how to throw off search teams. But it wasn't just questions. He talked about his dad, about how he felt distant from him, about something he wasn't ready to share yet. Then one post stood out. "I'll take him with me. We'll be safe together, just the two of us. He'll understand once we're away from everything." Tucker stared at the screen. Caleb wasn't running from his father. He was running with him. But that still didn't explain what went wrong. Back on the trail, the search team returned to the hidden path, hoping to find more than a notebook. Deputy Solis led the way. She was joined by Greg Miller and 2 others. They started from the same hidden camp and worked in the opposite direction of the lake. 2 miles in, they found something else. Footprints, faint but clear enough. A boot tread larger than Caleb's shoes. It matched the kind Mark wore. They led downhill toward a narrow creek. The team followed carefully. Halfway down, they found a pair of worn gloves, one inside out, stuck in the mud. Nearby was a torn grocery bag with 2 energy bars and an empty water bottle. "This wasn't left long ago," Greg said. They marked the area and set up trail cams. If someone was still out there, Caleb, Mark, or someone else, they needed eyes in the woods. That night, back in town, a man named Owen Gilroy walked into the sheriff's office. Mid-40s, lean face tanned from years outside. He asked for Tucker. She met him in the hallway. "Can I help you?" "You're looking for the Bellamys, right?" Owen said, scratching his arm. "That's right. I saw them." Tucker's eyes narrowed. "About a week after they went missing. I was hiking near Ironback Ridge, about 10 miles out. That's far from the lake." Owen nodded. "I know, but I saw them. I swear." The boy was carrying a pack. The man looked tired, dirty. They didn't wave back, just kept walking like they didn't want to be seen. "You're sure it was them?" Owen pulled out his phone. "Didn't want to spook them, but I got a picture." He handed it to her. The photo was grainy, taken from behind a cluster of trees, but the figures were clear: a boy with dark hair, a tall man in a worn baseball cap. Mark Tucker exhaled slowly. "Why didn't you report this earlier?" "I didn't think it was them at first. Not till I saw their faces on a flyer this morning. I didn't want to get involved." Tucker turned to Deputy Miller. "Get a team to Ironback Ridge tonight." The following morning, the search team was on the ridge. The air was cooler here, the ground rocky and harder to track. They split into pairs, sweeping out from the ridge in wide circles. Near a rock outcrop, Deputy Solis found a fire pit. Still warm, not just ashes, fresh smoke. And near it, the edge of a silver wrapper. A granola bar, same brand Lynn said Caleb liked. They were close. Then came the radio call. Greg's voice, "Found something." Down in the hollow, Tucker and Solis ran. They found Greg standing beside a shallow stream. In the mud, clear as day, 2 fresh sets of footprints. One large, one small, headed uphill. Not back to town, but deeper into the woods. Tucker returned to her truck, pulled out her phone, and called Lynn. "They're alive," she said. "We're sure of it now." Lynn gasped. "You saw them. A witness did. And we found signs. We're closing in. They're trying to stay ahead, but they're not far." "Why?" Lynn asked. "Why would they keep running?" "I don't know yet," Tucker admitted. "But I'm going to find out." As she hung up, she looked back at the tree line. Somewhere beyond those trees, a boy was trying to disappear, and his father, whether willing or not, was with him. By the next morning, Sheriff Tucker had a full team assembled at the base of Ironback Ridge. 2 forest rangers joined her crew, and the air was buzzing with movement, maps being spread out, boots laced tight, drone batteries checked. The plan was simple: fan out, follow the trail, and bring them in safely. She made it clear to every person involved: no loud orders, no shouting. If they're alive and hiding, we don't want to scare them further. We don't know what mental state they're in. They split into 3 teams. Tucker led the central group. They would track the prints found by the stream. 2 clear sets headed uphill. Solis and her crew would head northeast, while Greg Miller took the western sweep. The ground was damp from last night's light rain, but that worked in their favor. The forest floor held impressions like a page holds ink. 15 minutes into the hike, they spotted broken branches and faint boot marks. One set still large, heavy, likely marks. The other lighter, spaced unevenly. "Caleb?" Tucker knelt down. She touched one of the prints gently. "Still soft." "They were here this morning," she whispered. She looked ahead. The ridge narrowed, forcing any travelers into a tight valley between 2 steep hills. Perfect for an ambush if someone was paranoid. She motioned for silence and continued forward. Meanwhile, in a hidden shelter beneath a camouflaged tarp, Caleb crouched next to his father. Mark sat with his back to a large tree, one hand over his stomach. His face was pale, sweaty. His leg was propped up awkwardly on a rolled-up coat. Caleb held a canteen to his lips. "Drink, Dad?" Mark took a sip, coughed, and tried to speak. "We can't keep doing this." Caleb shook his head. "Just a little farther. I saw a place on the map last night. A ranger cabin. It's another 2 miles, but it might have supplies. Maybe even a radio." Mark didn't answer right away. "You should have told me, Caleb, from the start." "I didn't know how," Caleb whispered. "You never would have come if I told you what I was planning." Mark turned to face him. "That's because it was reckless. You didn't think about anyone else." "Your mother?" Caleb looked down. "I didn't think we'd be gone this long. I just wanted to get away, just for a while." Mark closed his eyes and exhaled. "We can't hide forever. It's time to go back." But Caleb wasn't listening. He peeked through a tear in the tarp, scanning the woods below them. Then he saw something, movement. "Dad," he said quietly, "someone's coming." Tucker's team had narrowed in on the valley. The trees thinned slightly ahead, forming a natural basin. Just enough sunlight leaked through to make shadows long and easy to spot. A motion caught her eye. She raised a hand, halting the group. She crouched behind a mossy rock, pulled out her binoculars, and scanned the area. Then, just for a second, she saw a flash of movement. A tarp fluttering, a face young, sharp eyes watching them. "Caleb," she whispered. She grabbed her radio. "This is Tucker. I've got eyes on the boy. We are northeast of the stream, about 300 feet up the basin. Move quietly, I repeat quietly." She didn't wait. Tucker rose slowly, keeping her badge visible, one hand open. "Caleb," she called softly, "it's Sheriff Tucker. I'm not here to hurt you. We just want to talk." No reply. She moved forward, one slow step at a time. "I've spoken to your mom. She misses you. She wants you both home. We can help you. But you've got to let us." Still no movement. Then she heard it, rustling from the left. Fast. Tucker turned just in time to see someone sprinting through the trees. Caleb. She chased him. "Stop, Caleb, stop." But he was quick, darting between trees like he knew the forest better than any of them. And he probably did. He'd studied it for months. Tucker followed him for nearly 50 yards before she lost sight of him behind a thick bush. She cursed under her breath. Back at the tarp, Deputy Solis arrived to find Mark Bellamy barely conscious. "He's injured," she called into the radio. "Right leg, looks like a break or a deep cut. He needs medics now." Tucker turned back and rushed to the site. She arrived just as the paramedics did. They began stabilizing Mark, wrapping his leg and preparing a stretcher. Tucker knelt next to him. "Mark, it's Dana Tucker, you're safe now." Mark blinked. "My son," he ran. "We're tracking him, but we've got you." Mark reached out, grabbing her hand. His voice was rough. He didn't mean harm. He was scared. "Thought someone was after us." I didn't believe him. Then I started seeing signs. Same car following us for days before the trip. He thought we'd be taken. Taken by who? Tucker asked, surprised. Mark tried to answer, but his head lolled back. The medics lifted him onto the stretcher. Tucker stood up, watching them go. Her mind raced. Caleb hadn't just been running from the world. He thought someone was watching them. Someone real. An hour later, back at the station, she reviewed the surveillance footage again. The last days before the trip, she requested neighborhood camera access. Then something clicked. One video showed the Bellamys leaving their driveway. 2 minutes later, a dark SUV passed their house. Another clip, same SUV parked across from Caleb's school. 3 times, different days, same car. She pulled the license plate. It was fake. She ordered a full investigation into the vehicle. Who it belonged to, why it followed the Bellamys. Because maybe, just maybe, Caleb wasn't imagining it. Out in the woods, the sun dipped low. Caleb crouched behind a fallen log, his breath heavy, his hands shaking. He'd seen them take his dad. Part of him wanted to follow, run back, give up. But the other part, the one that had driven this whole thing, kept whispering, "They still don't know everything. You're not safe." So he stayed hidden. He waited for night. Then he got up and started walking again, this time toward the ranger cabin, the place he'd read about, the place where he could finally leave behind what he'd started. Or maybe end it. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you are watching from today and what time you are currently watching this video. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more. Caleb's legs ached with every step. He'd been walking for nearly 2 hours through dense forest, branches slapping his arms, roots threatening to twist his ankles. His clothes were damp with sweat, his shoes soaked from a shallow creek he had crossed. But he didn't stop, he didn't dare. The ranger cabin was supposed to be nearby, a run-down emergency shelter listed on an old survival forum. It had no power, no radio, no real supplies, but it was off-grid. Hidden, exactly what he needed. He paused, leaned against a tree, and checked his watch. Nearly 4:30 p.m. He hadn't eaten since that granola bar yesterday. His throat was dry. But none of it mattered if they found him before he reached that cabin. Caleb looked around. Everything was starting to look the same. Pines, rocks, fallen logs. The sun was starting to dip. Shadows stretched longer. He pulled out a folded paper from his back pocket, an old trail map he'd marked himself. He was close. Back at the sheriff's office, Tucker paced in front of a large screen filled with maps and camera footage. She was connecting dots now, and the picture was changing. The SUV that had been seen following the Bellamys didn't just show up randomly. She had located it again, captured on traffic cams outside the outdoor supply store where Caleb had bought his gear 3 months ago. Same plates, same dark tint. She turned to Deputy Greg. "I want a trace on every security feed near that store from that day. Someone followed him. Someone spooked that boy into running." Greg nodded. "We've got a partial face from a convenience store door cam. Facial recognition's running." Tucker turned to the map. "And I want all eyes in the northeast quadrant of Ironback Ridge. I think that's where he's headed." She pointed at a small, unmarked square. "Ranger Station 12. It's been abandoned for years. But if Caleb found records online, that's the perfect place to hide." In the woods, Caleb finally spotted it. The ranger cabin stood alone in a small clearing, its wooden walls weathered gray from years of rain and sun. The windows were dirty but intact. A rusty chimney stuck out of the side. He crept forward, checking every side for signs of movement. It was quiet, no footprints, no recent trash, no smoke. He pushed open the front door. It groaned loudly. Inside, the air was stale. A single wooden table stood in the center. A bunk bed was shoved in the corner. Dust coated everything, but it was shelter, it was his. He closed the door behind him and dropped his pack on the floor. Then he sat down and cried, not loudly, just silent tears rolling down his face. He was tired, hungry, scared, and most of all, he didn't know what to do next. He had let his dad into this mess, and now his dad was hurt, maybe worse. Caleb wiped his face and opened the notebook he always carried. He flipped to the last page he had written. "If you're reading this, I'm sorry." He stared at it, unsure what to write next. At Ironback Ridge, Sheriff Tucker was moving fast. They had the photo matched to a name, Gavin Mercer, 38, ex-military, no known address. But he had history. 2 years ago, he'd been suspected of trying to recruit teenagers online for a back-to-nature extremist group. Nothing stuck, no charges, but the forum usernames matched Caleb's chat logs. Wander Echo 88 had been talking to Survive Pure. Gavin Mercer was Survive Pure. Tucker gritted her teeth. He wasn't just feeding Caleb ideas, he was guiding him. Maybe even meeting him. Greg's eyes widened. "You think he was planning to take Caleb?" "Worse," Tucker said. "I think he was grooming him to join something dangerous." She turned to the map. "And if Mercer's still out there, he might be headed to that cabin too." She grabbed her radio. "All teams be advised, suspect possibly armed and dangerous. We believe Caleb may be heading to Ranger Station 12. Approach with caution." As darkness crept in, Caleb lit a candle he found in a drawer. The flickering light danced across the walls. He heard a sound outside, leaves crunching. He froze. His heart pounded. He snuffed out the candle with his fingers and crouched behind the table. The front door creaked slightly, just enough to make his chest tighten. Then a knock, 3 soft taps. Caleb didn't breathe. A voice followed, calm, familiar. "Caleb, it's me, Gavin." Caleb's blood ran cold. He stood slowly and moved toward the back wall, where a window looked out into the forest. He peered through it. There he was, Gavin Mercer, calm, smiling. "I've been looking for you," the man said softly. Caleb's hands curled into fists. "I told you not to follow me," he whispered under his breath. Gavin continued, "I know things didn't go to plan, but we can still fix this. Your dad's safe. I saw them take him in. You did the right thing." Caleb backed away from the window. "You lied," he shouted. "You said it would just be me and him. You said no one would get hurt." Outside, Gavin's voice didn't change. "Caleb, I never lied. I just told you what you needed to hear." Something snapped in Caleb then. He wasn't going to be tricked again. He grabbed the hiking pole he had turned into a spear. Not to attack, just to buy time. He moved toward the front door, locked it. Then he ran to the back window and pushed it open. Outside, the forest was waiting. Again. Miles below the ridge, Sheriff Tucker's team had picked up movement on a thermal drone, small heat signature, moving fast. Then a second signature, larger, slower. About 50 yards behind, they had eyes on both. Tucker grabbed her radio. "He's being followed. Get someone on the west side of the cabin. If we don't intercept that man now, we lose them both again." She turned to her team. "Let's move." In the woods, Caleb ran. Branches whipped his face, but he didn't stop. He could hear Gavin's footsteps behind him, closer now. Then flashlights ahead, voices. "Caleb, it's Sheriff Tucker. Stop, you're safe." He almost didn't believe it, but he recognized her voice. He slowed, collapsed to his knees. Then arms were around him, a blanket. Warmth. "You're okay now," Tucker said, her voice steady. Behind them, Gavin appeared from the trees, hands raised. Deputies surrounded him. "I was just trying to help," he said calmly. But no one was listening. Tucker turned back to Caleb. "You did the right thing," she said. But Caleb only looked past her, his eyes still wide with fear. He had escaped the woods, but part of him was still lost inside them. Sheriff Dana Tucker sat across from Caleb in a small, quiet room at the medical center. He was wrapped in a gray blanket, his face pale and thinner than she remembered from the photos. His eyes looked older, like someone who had been through too much in too little time. It had been 4 days since they found him in the forest. Gavin Mercer had been arrested without resistance and was now being held in a secure facility. Mark Bellamy was recovering well at the hospital. His leg was fractured, but he'd be walking again in a few weeks. Tucker placed a cup of hot chocolate in front of Caleb and sat down slowly. She didn't speak at first, she just waited. Finally, Caleb broke the silence. "I didn't think it would end like this." Tucker nodded. "You were scared." "That's understandable. But now's the time to tell us everything. From the beginning. No one's going to yell. No one's going to blame. We just need to know what happened out there." Caleb hesitated, then took a breath. "It started months ago. I was just watching survival videos online. Then I found this forum, Treleco. Gavin messaged me there. At first it seemed harmless. He talked about freedom, living away from the world. I was tired of everything, school, pressure, people telling me what to do." He looked down. "I didn't plan to disappear at first. I just wanted to go away for a few days. But Gavin kept messaging me. He told me I could have real freedom, that I could take my dad and we'd be safe together. He said there were people watching us, that they'd never let us be free." Tucker leaned forward. "Did you believe him?" Caleb nodded slowly. "At first, no. But then I started noticing things. That black SUV, it passed by our house more than once. I saw it parked near school. He showed me pictures of people who had been followed, said it would happen to us too." "Did he ever say who they were?" Caleb shook his head. "No names, just they. The people who don't want you off the grid. And your dad?" "I didn't tell him everything. I told him I wanted a weekend away. Just the two of us. He liked the idea. But once we were on the boat, I told him more. That we shouldn't go home, that we could go into the woods, live off the land." Tucker raised an eyebrow. "What did Mark say?" "He thought I was kidding at first. Then he got upset, told me we were going home after the weekend. I panicked. I told him someone was watching us, that it wasn't safe anymore. I showed him the burner phone Gavin gave me. That's when he really got worried." Caleb paused. "That night, the boat drifted because I didn't tie it right. We were already deep in the cove. I made him hike into the woods with me. I kept telling him it was for our safety, that we couldn't go back." Tucker listened carefully. "Did Gavin meet you out there?" "Not at first," Caleb replied. "He said he would follow from a distance, make sure we were okay. But a few days in, we got turned around. My dad fell, hurt his leg bad. We found a place to hide, but I knew I couldn't take care of him on my own. That's when Gavin showed up." "Did you ask for his help?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "No, he just appeared. He said he'd take over from there. I didn't like the way he said it. I told him to leave. But he didn't. He stayed close, watched us. We moved camp twice, but he kept finding us." Tucker nodded. "We think he had a GPS tag on the bag he gave you." Caleb's face dropped. "I didn't know. I thought I was in control." "You're a kid, Caleb. He knew how to manipulate you. He said he'd help. Then he started talking about leaving my dad behind. Said he was slowing us down, that I had to choose." Tucker leaned forward. "Is that why you ran again?" Caleb nodded. "I left my dad food and water. I told him I was getting help. I just didn't say who from. Then I ran toward the ranger station. I figured if I got there first, maybe I could call someone, do something. I didn't want to be part of this anymore." "You did the right thing," Tucker said. Caleb's voice was barely a whisper. "But I almost didn't." 2 days later, Mark Bellamy was released from the hospital. He walked slowly, using crutches, but his mind was sharp. He hugged Caleb at the station, long, tight, and without a single word for the first 10 seconds. "I should have listened more," Mark finally said. "I didn't know how bad things were getting for you." "I should have told you sooner," Caleb replied. "I didn't think you'd understand." "Well," Mark said with a faint smile, "I do now." The investigation into Gavin Mercer continued. His cabin was found 50 miles west of Ironback Ridge. Inside, survival gear, false IDs, maps with markings near several schools. Sheriff Tucker wasn't sure if he was part of something larger or just a man obsessed with control. Either way, he'd be facing multiple charges, kidnapping, endangerment, and more. Tucker updated the press carefully. She didn't reveal the full story, just enough to quiet the noise. The headline read, "Father and son found after vanishing, boat discovered with dinner still on the grill." But that was only the surface. 3 weeks later, the Bellamys returned to the lake. Not to fish, just to see it again. The boat had been towed and stored by the sheriff's office. The grill still had the char marks from their last meal. Caleb touched it gently. "It still smells like sausage," he muttered. Mark laughed. Tucker stood a few feet away, arms crossed, watching father and son side by side. She didn't interrupt. After a while, Caleb turned to her. "Do you think people will understand?" She looked at him, serious but kind. "Some will, some won't, but the ones who matter will." Mark placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "We're moving forward. That's what counts." Caleb looked out over the water. "It all started right here," Mark nodded, "and it ended right here too. But in reality, it didn't end. They were just starting over." Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you are watching from today and what time you are currently watching this video. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more.